I'm David Creamer, here with our mom, Iola Creamer, at the Bowersville Church of Christ, now known as the Church Annex Building. This is the last of our planned video series as we recently celebrated her 105th birthday. In this video, we want Mom to tell us her memories of growing up here in this church where she has served her entire life. And then later, we will hear how Dad, Jim Creamer, met our mother. Here's a bit of the history about the Bowersville Church of Christ. It was organized in 1851 with a group of about 22 believers. Christopher Hussey, Mom's great-grandfather, gave them the plot of ground for about $30. And a 30 by 40 frame structure was built by R.A. Bowmaster. The church quickly grew to about 100 by the end of the first year. This building has changed in its appearance over the course of years. Mom, describe what it used to look like.
Well, when it was first built, I guess where those two windows are there was the doors. And in between that area was where the pulpit was. And then at that time they did not have a baptistry. They had anything they baptized them in a creek.
In the creeks. That would be cold.
Yes.
So what about the baptistry? Which it was on the east side of the building?
Yes.
Okay.
At that time, I guess the church was kind of turned around, and the windows were closed, and there was a front door. The vestibule wasn't there, and there was a baptistry over here in the floor. We could see that before they put the covering on the floor, in the wood floors where it had been closed up. And then later, I remember there was a baptistry after this part was built on. There was a baptistry right in here in the floor, and I remember actually seeing my sister Letha baptized in there.
So, any other family members you remember being baptized in there?
No, that would have been the only one that I really remember.
Okay. Tell us about the pulpit. Who built the pulpit?
His name was Reeson Bowermaster, and it's beautiful. It's the one that we still have in the church building across the street where we are now. And I don't know. I think they said it cost $25 when they built it.
Any other original furniture still in this building? Or even the other building?
Well, yeah, there was a few things taken over there when we moved. The clock was one,
okay.
And some little stands. I know there was a little round stand that Nell Sheridan was a secretary, and that little stand sat right over here, and she sat there. And every Sunday when the classes would put down their numbers, and they even had how many chapters. They would ask how many chapters anybody read that week, and that was all reported. She would stand up and read that off, but there was a board then when she would put the numbers up on, so you could remember from week to week.
Okay. So tell us about the additions that were added to this building.
Okay, in about 1925 is about the time I started this school, that these back rooms back here were built on. C.M. Reed was our minister at that time, and he was pretty well carpenter, no doubt. And it was, of course, the people around, members of the church, most of them were farmers, and so they would take their spare time and come in and help, and that was built on. And then that's when the baptistry was moved to that back wall, and they had steps on either side in each room, and one was for the girls and the other one was for the men.
Okay. Now, is this baptistry the one they filled from the cistern?
Yeah, it was, there's a cistern right out here that, I forget the names of the man and his son from Sabina, dug the cistern in for them. I remember seeing even what they paid for it. And then there was just a pitcher pump, so to fill the baptistry, that was quite a task, that you just stand and pump to fill the baptistry.
Now, you boys made, or had a lot of good things to say about Paul Neal.
Yeah, Paul was a young minister, well, in fact, when they hired him, he hadn't graduated from Cincinnati Bible Seminary yet. But, and he came to our house, and he brought Mary Frances, who was his girlfriend at that time. They were engaged.
Okay.
And when the church hired him, and they came then just right away, as soon as the school year was over. They were married. In fact, they graduated in the morning and was married in the afternoon, is what they always told us.
So did he teach then primarily? Is that what
he was just young, and he had a lot of energy, good ideas, and that's when that year we had the first daily vacation Bible school that was ever held in Bowersville, and we had over 200 kids, because kids from the Methodist Church and from Paintersville. I know we brought in several kids that lived down in our neighborhood, and it was supposed to last 2 weeks. Well, Doodle Hargrave told me one time, she said, we older kids begged for the third week, and she said, we didn't realize what it did to you women, that we had to have three weeks of Bible. We had it in the mornings, what we had it.
So you were baptized in this building, so your
Yes.
spiritual journey started
Yes.
in this building.
I was baptized on December the 7th. I was in the 7th grade. And that night I was baptized, there were 3 other girls baptized, and there was about 3 or 4 boys. It was all from our Sunday school class. We was having a revival, and it was December the 7th, whatever year when I was in the 7th grade.
1931.
So that's what it was, okay.
I wasn't around 1931,
No.
so. But, all right, so tell us the story of your grandmother Flora as a child.
Okay, well, back when when they first built the building, where the 2 windows are, as we said, there was the doors there, and the pulpit stood between there. The vestibule was not there at that point. And her and her sister, Kate, got dressed early one Sunday morning and came down. In the meantime, they walked. They lived out on just the edge of town, north edge of town, where the Mileys had lived. It was a big 2-story home. That was the Hussey homestead. And those girls, they got ready and walked down. Well, in the meantime, a storm came up, and so the rest of her family didn't get to come. And so she had a hat that she wore that one of her sisters had gotten it for. And I guess all around it had a brim, and all around the brim it had little beads on it. And so she said she proceeded to get up, walking, shaking her head, making the beads rattle, went out one door and came back in the other and shaking her head. So there was an old neighbor lady that lived down on Carpenter Lane at that time, and she always came every Monday to their home to get buttermilk. And so she'd been at church that day, and so she told on her what she had done. And Grandma said, my mother said to my sister who was sitting there, I told you so. And she said, my sister got up, left the room, and she said, when I saw my hat again, the beads were gone.
So Grandma and Grandpa Burr were also members here, and so what's your memories of them?
Well, when Mom and Dad were married, she was baptized here after they were married, and they were staunch members of the church here all their lives. In fact, they ended up when my grandparents, Grandpa and Grandma Burr, had been janitors here for years. And when they got beyond that, and when Mom and Dad moved to town, then Mom and Dad, they were the janitors of the building here until we moved across the street. Well, they were janitors over there too.
So your mom was baptized then after she was
After
married?
she was married.
Yeah, so that was, okay. One of the longest standing organizations of the Bowersville Church of Christ is the Ladies' Aid. It was organized in 1909 by Miss Crabtree, the minister's wife.
It was the minister's mother.
Oh, the minister's mother, okay.
Yeah.
According to the church history book, the Ladies' Aid was instrumental in purchasing and improving the church parsonage. As their name implied, they aid in many painting projects and any other general improvements of the church building. The ladies made their money in many ways: Dutch suppers, old hen socials, penny per inch waist measurements, and quilt sales, among the other. Mom, in your early memories, tell us about the Ladies' Aid meetings.
Well, back talking about the Ladies' Aid, when it was established, at that time, the parsonage that belonged to the church was down where whoever the mayor of Bowersville is, where he lives now. That was the original parsonage. And a blind man had built this house over here, and it had all these buildings walking around it connected that he could get out and walk around, not get lost. And for years, if anybody here at the church, we did not have outside toilets and no water. And if anybody needed to go to the bathroom, they went over there, or they went to the pump. They always kept a cup out there for people to get them a drink if they wanted to.
And was that in a cistern? Was that in a cistern? It wasn't a well, right?
Yeah, that was a well on their porch.
Okay.
That was all built in. There was all these buildings that, as I said, this guy was blind, and he had it fixed so he could get out and walk around, not get lost. And one building was for coal, one was for cobs, and I guess the other one was just a spare room they could store it. Plus the toilet was all enclosed in there, the well and everything. And of course, in later years, and they tore all that away.
Okay. So the Ladies' Aid wasn't really held in a church building; it was held in
Homes at that time,
right?
Yeah.
So,
Well, back to talk about the Ladies' Aid. When they bought this, they said they were going to pay for the parsonage.
really?
They were going to pay for the parsonage. So the day it sold at public auction, and the elders of the church bid it off and paid for it. But through a few years, the Ladies' Aid paid the elders back. So the Ladies' Aid actually bought the parsonage and took care of it for lots of years. You know, when new ministers would move in, if it needed wallpapering or painting or whatever, it was taken care of. And when Paul Neal was here, then that's when all them buildings were torn away. And actually they bid them off. They sold them at public auction. Some of the farmers and people bought them and moved them out of the way. And so even the window in the living room was covered with them outside buildings. So when that was torn away, then they had access to the sunshine.
Okay. So how many women would come to these?
Oh, the Ladies' Aid, probably 30 ladies, and they had them in the homes. And in the summertime, of course, you had quite a few more because there were kids involved. Because we went with our mom every summer. Susie Hollingsworth would pick her up, and we'd go to the Ladies' Aid.
So food was provided then at the Ladies' Aid meetings when you had that? You had like a
carry-in dinner.
It was carry-in dinner.
We had a carry-in dinner, and then even back then, they'd have the quilting frames, and they would put it up in somebody's room. And I don't know that they quilted as much, but they knotted a lot of comforters is what they did, because they could do them in a couple, 3 hours with women sitting on either side of the frames.
So they did obviously things to raise money, so that they basically, the stock sales, is that something?
Yeah, we
that
went to
they do?
Wilmington to the stock sales, and that's where we really made good money over there. But we were there, I think, 3 or 4 years. And actually, at that time, we were still in this building, and we bought new carpet, because before we had just had that rubber mat. We bought new carpet enough that came down through here and down through the other aisles,
Okay.
and the stage.
I'm really curious about the penny per inch waist measurements. What was that
Well,
about?
they had a tape measure, and however much you measured around your waist, you had to pay a penny.
Well, you had to pay the penny.
You paid a penny. That was the
so-
way they raised money.
Okay, all right, so.
And then they had, at one time, and that was in my time after I was married even, they had a basket with some groceries in, and it would go past everyone, and you paid for what you thought was in that, and you kept that, but then you had to fill it again and pass it on to somebody else. And that made quite a little bit of money for a while.
So it says, basically, the town of Bowersville, basically, when you made that video, you talked about a huge part of family activities centered around the church and the church activities. So tell us about that.
Well, as I said now, we did, Our Lady's Aids throughout all those years was held in the homes because the basement was not fixed up that we could even use it for anything. And of course, later years, then in the other building, that's where we had them. But they were always held in the homes. And my mom always had the month of April. She said, well, that makes me clean house. So I got my house cleaned, ready for all the women to come.
So is that what they called the loyal partners?
No, that was,
Okay.
the Loyal Partners was after we were married. It was a young married people's class. And we met back here in this room.
Okay.
And at the end, before we left this building, there was a standing room only in there.
Really?
We had that many people. We was having 200 people in this church.
Wow, that's pretty incredible.
Yes, it was.
You know. Well, Mom, there are several things that intrigue me about this Ladies' Aid and some of your fundraising that you had. What was the old hen socials?
Well, of course, most all the ladies were farm ladies, and I guess they wanted you to give whatever. If you sold an old hen, however much money you would get out of her, then that was the money you donated to the Ladies' Aid.
Okay. So did that happen every meeting? Did
Well,
people sell
no,
their
it would go
chickens and-
one year. Next year was
Okay.
something else.
But it was the
I
old.
remember one time, one Ladies' Aid, we went to Aunt Katie's, and they asked every woman to bring a lemon. And they cut the lemons, and you paid a penny for every seed in your lemon. And then they used the lemons and made lemonade.
Well, somebody was very creative in how to raise money, so.
And that was my Aunt Femi Lewis.
Okay.
She had all good ideas, and she was president for lots of years.
Okay. So can you recall some of the other names that were participating in the Ladies' Aid?
Well, way back then, that would have been Susie Hollingsworth, of course, for several years, and Belle Rife was the president for lots of years, and Ethel Persinger was always coming, and of course my mom went, and summertime we got to go, so we always had a good time. And I think Aunt Katie came. Of course, I can remember my Grandma Burr and my Grandma McCullough both being in the Ladies' Aid, and Allie Harness, and just Ethel Persinger. Maybe I said her already. But
Mildred Rothwell?
Mildred Rothwell in later years.
Okay.
Mildred got coming, and she was secretary for, I'm not sure, maybe 20 years that she was a secretary and kept the records.
Okay. So those records still exist, right?
Yes, I
So-
think they're over in the other building in that glass showcase.
Okay. Do you have any idea how much money you actually did raise?
The ladies'
I
aid?
reckon it would be in those reports, right?
Well, oh, yes. Well, Grace Mason was the treasurer for lots of years. And then Ruth Meddock, I think, was treasurer some years. And, but the money that we got at the stock sales over at Wilmington, we had 3 weeks that they would let us. And of course, the first week was kind of hard because we had to move everything over there. Second week, then we could leave our equipment and stuff. And then the third week, we had to bring it back home. But we made good money over there, enough that they, maybe I'd said this, they carpeted with it was red carpet and the stage and that was good money that finally got done away with, I guess.
Almost sounds like an army of women.
Well, it was. It took them all. Well, I know some of my older girls probably remember, maybe the younger ones too, remember going over there because it was always summertime when we had it.
All right, well, move on here. And it says basically that, and because of this church, this is how you and Dad got acquainted. Talk about that.
Well, of course, I always knew his grandparents because they were kind of around Bowersville, Grandpa and Grandma Boggs, and then Morris and Goldie Boggs. Morris was his uncle, and they were here in the church, and so then Grandma Creamer and the boys would come over occasionally on Sunday, and I guess, well, then Martha went home with Mildred and the Boggses one Sunday. They went over to the Creamers for Sunday dinner, and when she come home, she said Jean followed them out to the car and said, if Jim and I come over tonight, would you and Iola go to church with us? And that was the time, first date we ever had. And I think in my paper, they asked me to tell what my dad said about Jim.
Yeah, that's right.
And he said, you don't want to go with that big old tall bean pole, do you? Because Jim was tall. He was about 6'3", I think, and he weighed about 175 pounds, so he was pretty skinny looking.
At 175 pounds, 6'3", he would.
Yeah, he was. He was tall and thin, but he had beautiful curly hair.
So, now you went on a date at the Whitewater Camp in Brookville?
Yeah, that was in the spring, April, I think it was. And then we met out here in front of the church. And I don't know how many cars, there were several cars went. And that's when Jim had this convertible car. And so Harry Feastorn was his cousin, they lived neighbors to him. He brought Harry with him that night. And of course this car had that rumble seat. And so going down, Mildred and his sister Leila rode in the rumble seat. And Jim was driving and Harry was in front too. And we had to cross the Ohio River on a ferry because that's before the bridges were built. And we went down there to this church, and they served a nice supper. There was, I don't know, probably 15 or 20 from our church went down there that night. And then coming home, that's what they laughed about. They said that Harry drove, Leila and Mildred rode in the front, and Jim and I rode in the rumble seat. And he had his overcoat with him, and this was April, and it was pretty chilly. And so we used that overcoat, I think, but had it over our heads to keep us warm.
Well, I think you need to probably, not to put you on the spot here, but some people might not know what the rumble seat was. So can you kind of describe that?
Well,
what that's like?
It was a convertible also that the top would go down.
Yeah.
And then it had this rumble seat. I think there was a step or two on the bumper area that you could climb to get in.
Yeah, but it was actually over the trunk.
Oh, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
Okay.
And it had a nice soft cushion seat in there. And of course, it would close down. It just looked like the boot of a
So you
car.
never knew it was really there. So
No, you wouldn't know unless you had it open.
was the exhaust really bad?
No, I don't remember.
You just,
I don't remember that.
Oh, you were thinking about Dad probably, so there you go. Okay. So 13 months then, you all decided to get married.
Yeah.
Right? So tell us about getting married.
It was the 18th of December, the week before Christmas. And before he went home that Sunday night, we decided that we would get married on Christmas Day. And so on Monday morning, I got up and, of course, I told my mom that that's what we were going to do. And I said, and you and Dad will have to go with me to the courthouse because I wasn't of age. You had to be 21 then to be of age. And Jim was 21.
Okay.
He had turned 21 in July, but I was just 19. And so on the Tuesday morning, I'll take it back. On that Monday night, he came, and the kids here from our church classes went Christmas caroling all around town, and then we came back down, and some of the women had fixed hot chocolate, and I don't know, they had sandwiches maybe that we ate down in the basement. But then that was on Monday night. Then on Tuesday morning, he came over, and Mom and Dad, and we went to Xenia and went to the courthouse and got our license. But at that point, they had a 5-day waiting period. When you got your license, you had to wait 5 days before you could get married. But they told us that day, because my mom and dad was with me, you could get married today if you want to. But of course, we waited till Christmas. But then we went from Xenia, then we went to Springfield, and there's what they call the Boston store, which was a nice department store in downtown Springfield. And Jim took us up there, and I don't know what him and Dad did, but Mom and I shopped, and she bought me a new dress, and a new hat, a new coat, a new pair of shoes, a new pair of hose. It was for nylon, and I think that was my wedding outfit.
Okay. Did your hat, I'm just curious, did your hat have beads on it?
No. It was felt. It was a wine color, because the dress was like a teal color, and it had a belt to it, and the ties on the belt was this color of what my hat was, so it kind of matched.
And you still have your wedding
And I've
dress.
still got all my clothes and Jim's suit that he had. It's still up in my attic. But I can't wear the shoes. I can't get my feet in them now because they were like 9s, and I have to have a 10.5 now.
Okay. All right.
So on Sunday morning, he picked me up about maybe 7:30, and it had snowed, and then it had turned to rain. And so after Jim came and I was dressed, we went out in the yard. We had this old box camera, and Martha took a picture, only one picture, and of course it wasn't very good. So that was the only picture we had of our wedding. But then we came up to the parsonage over here. Arthur Brewer was a minister at that time, and we had come up on Thursday evening and talked to him about marrying us and all. And in their living room is where we were married. Robert and Iola met us here, and Jim's brother Robert, and they met us here, and they were our attendants at the wedding. And then after that, we went to Milledgeville to church because Jim's uncle, Charles Boggs, was going to preach over there that day. And so we went to church, and then after church was over, we went to Sabina to his grandpa and grandma Boggs' house for Christmas dinner. And it was raining pretty hard all the rest of the day. It wasn't a very nice day. And I think the guys played cards in the afternoon for a while. And then they had a Christmas program here in this building that night. And we came here for that. And then we spent the night down at my house at home. And then on Monday morning, Mom and Dad and Martha, they had fixed a dinner, and Jim's parents, and his brother and sister, and his grandparents, the Grandpa and Grandma Boggs, and the preacher and his wife, and the rest of my family, Forrest and Thelma and Letha and Lawrence, of course, were married with them. And we had a dinner, and then that afternoon, I don't know, a lot of family come out. I remember Aunt Katie and Uncle Charlie, Miley, and Uncle Lonnie's, and all them would come to the house. And then that night, it was dark, here comes the belling crowd. And the belling crowd there, well, it's made up of neighbors, friends, and the men bring their shotguns to shoot up in the air, and the women have pots and spoons to bang on, anything to make a noise. And of course, they expect you to meet them, and they expected, the men expected cigars, and the women expected candy. And that was the belling then. And then the next week we was over at Jim's folks, and then there was belling crowd from Milledgeville came. So we had two bellings.
You got two bellings.
Had two bellings. But I think bellings are not heard tell of anymore. I think it stopped with World War II.
That interrupted a lot of people's lives.
Yeah, it
Sure
did.
did. So, I want to go back to the building here. In this room specifically, you said that basically there was quite a few Sunday school classes in this room. So,
well, I can spot them right over here in this corner was where the little beginners, those the little chairs we had. And in later years, I taught my two older girls sitting over there. I see, then there was a bench, the front bench is like this bench I'm sitting on.
okay.
It's what was in
Well,
here.
while you're here,
And
tell
they're
us about
solid
this bench.
walnut. They were solid walnut built by this recent Bowermaster. And they never were ever fastened to the floor. So if a kid or running bumped into one, you had domino effect. So the parents kind of had to watch their kids when they were in here after church. But, let's see, what else was there about that we need to talk about? Oh,
Well,
the classes in
yeah,
here.
how many more
Okay, the
classes?
little beginners was over there. And on the front row here, let's see, was juniors. Over here was primaries. Over in that corner was the old ladies class where my two grandmas were there. Grandma Burr and Grandma McCullough was there. And then back right there, there was another class for other ladies. They were midterm ladies, I guess. And then over in this corner, there was the old men's corner. And the women were there. And then down in here was my Grandma Burr and the older ladies. On the front seat was, primaries, juniors here. And back in there was an intermediate class. And then at that time, Mom and Dad were still out in here. Well, after this was built, then the Loyal Bereans class was back there, and that was what Mom and Dad were in. And then later, when the stage had the young single people, and then when those rooms were built on, let's see, Mom and Dad's class moved back there, and then there was they called them Loyal Sons and Daughters. They were the young people not married yet. And my mom taught that class for quite a few
She
years.
taught that.
My mom taught that class. And when each one of them would ever get married, she would buy enough tablecloth material and make them a tablecloth for a wedding gift, and she always hem-stitched.
Really?
So that was her treat to them.
Okay. So this bench right here, this one right here,
They set,
This would
see,
be-
there was a furnace here and here, big registers.
furnace.
And this was what was set in there next to that.
so did Bowmaster make this bench?
Absolutely, he made every one of these. And they were, I think there's one or two over in the other building that are down in the basement that they cut them off and they painted them for the little kids. And they set against the wall because they're not safe if they could upset them.
We probably sat in one of those, I guess.
Yeah,
so.
you have.
Bowersville Church of Christ has been a constant for you, 105 years now and counting. Dad served faithfully as an elder and a Sunday school teacher, made many repairs to this building and the one across the street. And Dad had 56 years of perfect attendance in Sunday school.
And that's when I want to tell you about, we traveled quite a bit. And every Saturday evening we'd get into a town. We would locate a church before we'd find a motel to make sure there was a church there. And then at one time we went with a group of builders to Acapulco in Mexico.
Okay.
And so they had told Jim that on Sunday that they would have a church service there in the hotel. Well, he found out on Saturday that wasn't going to happen. So he got a phone book and found a church. I don't remember, it was either Baptist or Methodist, but I'm not really sure. And so we got up Sunday morning and dressed and went outside. You didn't have to call a taxi. There was somebody out there waiting. So this guy that had a little Volkswagen's the one, and Jim had written the address down, and he looked at it, he said, "Oh, downtown." So we had been downtown. They had taken us on a tour, so we kind of knew what the downtown looked like. But anyway, he pulled up at this place, and we thought, don't know whether we want to get out or not. It looked pretty bad. But then there was a couple with their two little children standing at there was a gate, and it was padlocked. And they were standing there, though. So we got out, and of course, Spanish we didn't know and couldn't talk with them really. I got out pictures and showed them of you kids, and then pretty soon, somebody come and unlocked the gate. Well, we found out later it was the preacher. And the reason why they had done that, they were working on their building and they were protecting it, I think, to keep kids and people out from destroying some of their stuff. So we go in, Sunday school, and of course, not understanding one word, but we knew the people were, the teacher, that people would answer, talk to him. And so they took up an offering. I'd heard of it, but I never had seen it. But the offering basket was on a pole that they passed down in front of you, and you dropped your money in. Okay. And so then for church, they did the same thing. So twice they passed that. And of course, the songs they sang, we knew by the tunes, but didn't know any Spanish. So then the preacher, of course, we didn't understand one word he was saying. But when the service was over, there was a lady over on the far side of the church stood up, and she faced us, and she said, "They want me to tell you that they're happy to have you with us today." Okay. That's only words we understood. But it wouldn't take anything for that experience. And I think we were probably the only ones on the trip that went to church, because we came back. When we was coming back, we saw out on the streets, I don't know what was going on. A lot of people were gathered around with that. So, but that was a good experience.
And you got to visit some ministers, the former ministers, right, in Florida?
Paul Neal was out here. And in fact, we stayed in their home one year for a month because they had gone to California to visit their daughter. And he'd had an ad in the Christian Standard, and just a phone number, no name. And so Jim had seen that, and he said, "Call that number." He said, "That sounds good." And so I did, and said my name. And this guy kind of laughed. He said, "You don't know who you're talking to, do you?" And it was Paul Neal. And so, of course, he'd been a former minister here, And they were going to go to visit Alice Lynn, their daughter, in California. They were going to be gone, I think, a couple of months, because we stayed a whole month. And then we left, and somebody else came in and spent the next month. But that was a neat thing to do.
Speaking of Dad, of course, the family, we put a window in
Over at the
church. So
in memory of you. I kind of knew what I wanted, and I went to the bookstore there in Xenia, Bible bookstore. And I was kind of just looking around, and so the guy finally said, I told him what I was looking for. He said, okay. He gave me one of their big catalogs, and that's where then I kind of saw the picture, and he made a copy of the picture for me, and I took it over to Yellow Springs to that place. And this little girl, I handed it to her, and within 20 minutes, she had that sketched, what I wanted. And then they made it, and we picked it up and installed it.
Mom, you've taught children's Sunday school class for many years. You're a longtime member of the Missions Committee, a member of the Ladies' Aid, and many, many mother-daughter banquets programs you have helped to organize and plan. And you're a faithful and a loyal prayer partner and encourager still to this day. Is there anything else that you would like to share before we stop?
Well, I don't know. I just feel like my life's been blessed, I guess, to live to the age I am.
So thanks again for watching and listening to our videos. We're really enjoying putting these together as Mom has shared so many wonderful memories.